Hello and welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Paone and I'm so excited. I have the fabulous writer duo, best friends, authors, co-creators. They write under the pen name Ali Brady, but both of them individually, I'm welcoming Alison Hammer back to Lit Chick and welcoming our new guest, Bradeigh Godfrey. Welcome, ladies. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Yay! And we are here celebrating the release of your debut co-written novel, The Beach Trap, which is so fun. As one of our favorite writers, Colleen Oakley, put it, it is the Parent Trap meets Flipper Flop, which is like cross-section of my personal favorite interests. Like that's basically my personality is like the Parent Trap meets Flipper Flop. It's so much fun, such a great summer read, great beach book, but just a fun read anytime. I'm going to give a little info about you two and the book, and then we're going to hop into our questions. So Ali Brady is the pen name of writing BFFs Alison Hammer and Bradeigh Godfrey. The Beach Trap is their first book together. Alison lives in Chicago, where she works as a creative director for an advertising agency. She has no kids, pets, or plants, but she does have 2 solo books, You and Me and Us, and Little Pieces of Me. Bradeigh lives in Utah with her husband and 4 children. She works as a doctor, and her solo debut, Imposter, a psychological thriller, is forthcoming. Learn more about them at alibrady.books.net. The Beach Trap is one of Parade Magazine's Books We Love, one of Pop Sugar's must-reads for 2022, one of Katie Couric Media's 2022 must-reads, and one of the Chicago Tribune's books for summer 2022. In a starred review, Booklist says, from the deft manner in which the authors shift the narrative between their 2 protagonists to the dual romances that unfold with just the right dash of snarky wit and sexy sizzle, readers will find The Beach Trap to be an absolute delight. The Wall Street Journal says the book touches on beloved tropes of how you make your family, what to do with hot real estate, and the salubrious effects of beach romance. And the Washington Post says the real story is about sisters finding each other, the tale of 2 women who decide to put each other first. My kind of book. Welcome, ladies, and congratulations again on The Beach Trap. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's so weird and fun to hear you say all these things together. It's kind of crazy.
I always do that because I feel like I am a big believer in celebrating all of those moments. And I don't believe that anyone who creates anything gets it to hear all the praise read back to them by somebody else often enough. So I'm all for that.
It's surreal.
The book is great. It's so fun. It's exactly what I want in a summer read. It has so much heart and fun, and there's complexity and depth, but it's also ultimately uplifting. Let's dive right in. First of all, can you tell me how? Usually I start with what's the book about, give me your elevator pitch, but I'm going to start with what made you guys decide to write a book together? Obviously, you both write on your own, you're friends, but where did this idea come about? Tell me the story.
Well, I'll start with how we met, because it's kind of funny. We like to call it our meet cute.
Yeah.
And it actually started when I did a little bit of light stalking on Bradeigh. It's not as sinister as it sounds, but we are both members of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, a writing group. And through that organization, they had different things like pitch events where you could read different, share work. And I read, before we'd met, I read a 250-word sample of something Bradeigh wrote. And I'm like, she's so good. I want to be her friend.
Aww.
And then a few months later, there was an opportunity for us to swap pages. And I think we started with 25 or 50 pages, but we both hit it off so instantly. We loved each other's writing, and we loved each other's critique style, which is really important. Yeah. And we just kept going and kept going. And I literally remember the moment she called me her critique partner, which is going steady for writers.
Yeah.
It was I was so excited. So that's how our writing relationship started. Yeah. Bradeigh, do you want to tell how we took it to the next level?
Sure. So we were critique partners for a long time and became such good friends. And then it was spring of 2020 when everybody, the world was in lockdown, and I was home homeschooling kids. Alison was working from home, and we chat frequently throughout the day. And we were just chatting about book ideas, and Alison's told me about a book idea she had. And she said, what do you think about this idea? And I said, I really like it. And I also think it goes really well with a book idea that I have. So why don't we write a book together? So we decided to just write a book together. And as we were thinking about, other things we could write, we were thinking about but movies that we love. And one of them was The Parent Trap. And we thought, what if we did sort of a twist, more of an adult version of The Parent Trap? And that's sort of how The Beach Trap came to be.
I love that. And it is, as we said, Parent Trap meets Flip or Flop. And we were saying in the green room before the interview started, like, I do feel like The Parent Trap has this particular nostalgia moment, like right now in our consciousness, especially for like women in a couple certain generations that the three of us are in, right? That like we all have. And I think it's because we grew up with the Haley Mills one, and then we had the Lindsay Lohan one, Nancy Meyers one, and they're both so great. And they hit us at different points in our young lives. And it's just like kind of in the consciousness now. And I see a lot of like, oh, it's The Parent Trap, but blah, blah, blah. But I think you guys have done a really good version of this. Like, it's very clever. It's more complex, like some of the complexity in The Parent Trap is sort of glossed over, like, oh, this horrible thing happened, and and these two children were separated, and like they don't deal with like the trauma of that. And your book kind of unpacks the trauma. It's a different situation. Can you tell us a little bit about building that, and like sort of, without giving us spoilers, like kind of how you decided, like, okay, this is the direction we want to take our version of this story of sisters being separated and coming together?
Yeah, sure. So we were thinking about, what if instead of the sisters trying to bring their parents back together, it was parents trying to bring the sisters back together as adults. And so as we thought through what scenarios that would happen in, we just both really felt drawn to this idea of these two girls meeting at summer camp and finding out that they share a father. So they're half sisters. One of them was raised by the dad. One of them was not raised by the dad. Yeah. And there's instantly a lot of heartache on both sides. Growing up with that background could be really challenging for both people. And as they become, adults, there's still a lot of hurt feelings on each side, and they both have misconceptions about each other. And there was a lot of meat to explore that made it really interesting.
Yeah. And what was, so it sounds like the concept was sort of like you kind of went like high concept with this first, right? And then you sort of like, I'd love to hear, like, then so you started with the concept and then you built the two girls. You had like one who was raised with the father and one who wasn't, and you have your two characters, Kat and Blake. And then what had like give me was it concept, character, then setting, or was it like concept, setting, character? How did you build it out?
That's so interesting. I don't know if I can even remember. It happened so fast. It was literally like, what if we did this? And we talk constantly and are always kind of like building on each other's ideas. So it was like, it happened pretty fast. Like, what about this? What about that? We loved the idea of the father leaving them this rundown beach house, which, it's on the cover of the book. And so that they had like a project together, and they had something that brought them together. And then my dad lives in Destin. I've, been spent like the last 20 years going down there, and it is beautiful. My debut novel, You and Me and Us, was set there. And so with setting a book, to me, I think it really helps if you set it in a place that you're familiar with, so that you can like just kind of inherently bring in some of the details that bring the setting to life. And, we had to do some really hard research and spend a week down there on the beach, which, that was really, really tough.
So did you write or like outline the whole book during that week, or did you just like get together and, have some fun and then go back and work? How did that like, I'd love to hear about the process of like, did one of you take on one character and the other write the other character? Did you trade off, or did you just like outline the whole thing together? Like, give me the nuts and bolts of how this worked as a co-writing. I think it's so interesting. I've done so much co-writing. I come from a songwriting background, and songwriting, you do a lot of co-writing. I write with a lot of people. I write online. I write like in all kinds of weird ways, but it's interesting that now I think we're seeing more and more people writing books together. And I'd love to know how it worked for you from a nuts and bolts, like step-by-step process aspect.
Yes. So when you write with someone else, you do have to plot out very extensively. And so we did. We plotted out everything, chapter by chapter, very carefully, exactly what events were going to happen. And then also each of the characters and sort of their character growth and what their, wounds were from when they were growing up and how that was going to change over time. And then we do each take a character. So one of us took kind of charge of writing Kat. One of us took charge of writing Blake. And we're sort of secretive about who did who. But if people really want to guess, they can send us a message and we'll see what their guess is and tell them if they're right.
I have guesses. Just after talking to you both for a few minutes, I have guesses.
You have guesses.
I have theories.
But it made it really fun to allow us to sort of dive into really getting into one character's head. But then, of course, we would send our chapters to the other person to critique and edit. And so there's a lot of back and forth. So each of our fingerprints are on all of the chapters very extensively. So it's impossible to say who came up with exactly what, because it's very collaborative. But we both really enjoy sort of taking charge of one character.
Yeah. I like that. That's like, and it does feel very cohesive. It does feel like both Kat and Blake have their own unique perspective, but it doesn't feel like it's written by two different people. It feels like it's a cohesive narrative. And, I love that you say from the beginning, like, I think that's so important anytime you're co-writing. That's like sort of the number one rule of like music co-writing is like, if you're in the room, you get an equal share of the credit. So there's no like who wrote this or who did this, I did this melody line or you did this like lyric or, I did the chorus, and like, it's all, I think it takes a lot of trust and a lot of, just willingness to like have that partnership, which I think is amazing because it's what your book is about, really, is about these two women. And they, I don't think this will give too much away that like for part of the book, they are operating on this shared project separately. And then things happen and slowly they get more and more entwined and they're forced to really work together, which of course is a great thing to have happen. For you both, working on your own material at the same time as doing this, were you doing just this? Was this a specific chunk where you both set aside a few weeks or a few months to write this book, or were you simultaneously working on your own material while writing that? And was that ever hard to transition?
I think, it's been different. Writing a book is such a long process. Like, I don't think we were ever like 100% fully focused on this, but there were parts of time where we're like, okay, this is our priority. But then, things come up with our work lives, with our personal lives. And that's one of the benefits of having each other, because we can, like, if one of us is really overwhelmed, the other one can maybe pick up the slack a little bit. And we work really hard at keeping a schedule. So like you said, I love that, so you and so many people feel like it was written by one person. Yeah. And the way that we really did that is that, every week we would each write a chapter from that character's point of view. And then the next week we'd edit the chapter. So we both had our hands really on every stage of it. But, like, even just with our Ali Brady books, like, we were on our book tour trying to finish the draft of our next book. And so publishing is really juggling. And so we make an effort to make each other a priority, not just our working relationship, but also our friendship. We're proud of ourselves that we did a 2-week book tour and still love each other and want to write more books together. But we do, try to balance and help each other out when we need it.
I love that. Do you, terms of process, do you guys have a similar process, or are you sort of different style writers? It sounds kind of like you have a similar way of approaching things. Is one of you like, more of a pantser or a plotter, or like, and if so, kind of how did you work through those dynamics?
So I've tended to be more of a plotter. My individual writing is in thrillers, and you really have to, at least I have to plot out thrillers. Some people don't, but I have to plot them out. And so I tended to do more plotting, and Alison would write more by the seat of her pants. But when we kind of in between, but when you write together, you really have to do it together. So, but I think we lean on both of our strengths. So what one of us is good at, we both get to take advantage of that, which is really, really nice.
And, another thing is that because like it was such a natural transition, because we started out being critique partners, it's not that different, like in my second book, Little Pieces of Me, there's a line that like reviewers call out that they love so much. And Bradeigh wrote that. Like, like we are so ingrained in each other's projects.
I love that.
So it was a natural transition. And there is something different when it's like our book versus like hers or mine. But we worked together so well on our own books. It really was a natural transition.
Yeah. And Bradeigh, how was it for you? Like, so coming from the thriller, like, world, like that's, I love that. I love the like cross genre. Like, was it like, had you always wanted to write like, a rom-com, like kind of women's fiction thing on the side? Like was that different at all for you? Did you find the process different of writing this book, or was it just like, oh yeah, just like a thriller, except it's like love instead of death and like thin threads?
They are different in terms of how you, obviously, in terms of how you approach them. Thrillers are more plot based, and you have to be really careful about every single detail, and does it line up, and does it make sense? And if it's more women's fiction, romance, rom-com, it's all about the character arcs and does this feel believable? But I don't know. I think because I like to read both of these genres so much that they're sort of like two halves of my personality. So I just loved it. I thought it was incredible to be able to do both. So I am very happy to be able to explore both sides of myself.
I love that. And now, so the Beach Trap, like Alison, I'm more familiar with Alison's work just because of, previous interviews and things like that. So like Little Pieces of Me, and the Beach Trap revolves around a complex paternity issue and a complex family dynamic, and mostly relationships. Obviously, it's very heavy on the romance, but the heart of this book is this relationship between Kat and Blake, between these two half sisters and their love and sisterhood. And there's also, parental dynamics and intergenerational, grandparent dynamics, friend dynamics, all kinds of things. What about, these sisterhood, friendship, and family relationships in general, particularly those of women, appeals to both of you? And why do you feel drawn to tell a story like this?
Well, we both have sisters, and in this case they're half sisters, so really like it started as a close friendship, and we're both very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of really strong women friends and our sisters, and so there's just interesting dynamics there. But it's interesting because we didn't really like set out to write like a certain genre. We set out to write the book that we wanted to read. And we love relationships between women and sisterhood and like friend dynamics. We love a little bit of romance. There's a little bit of escapism. So really, like, we didn't write it to fit on a shelf. We really wrote the book that we wanted to read. And one of the things that's been really nice about it is that people who are drawn to sister stories, come in for that, and they get the bonus of romance. People who come in who love romance get, each sister has a romance. There's two romances. So those who come in for romance get the more depth of the sister story. So it's hopefully hitting a sweet spot and attracting all kinds of readers.
Absolutely. And I do want to point out, the fact that you frame it the way you do, the way the book is written, both from the emphasis on the sisters and the way the romantic relationships are written in the book, it's really an empowering feminist lens, like of a rom-com, which I so appreciate. And I feel like we really become like, this is really not the trend. I don't want to say trend. It's just the way the genre is moving to encompass more realistic portrayals of relationships. We're seeing healthy relationships. I really think like we're kind of done with that old mode of like, oh, this is a super unhealthy relationship and these two people should not be together. And instead seeing focus on the conflict comes not from them being ill-suited to each other or like there being an abusive dynamic or a weird dynamic in the romance, but we're really seeing like healthy, strong relationships of all kinds and the natural conflicts that result from being people, because being people is hard. And like sometimes being a person is hard. Like the offenses are forgivable, if that makes sense, and understandable. Can you talk a little bit about how that enters into your writing process? Is that conscious? Is that simply, that's just how it comes out because that's your experience with things? Like, is this, a conscious effort on your part to show, relationships that people would actually really want to be in, instead of like, like, oh, I don't know if she should have ended up in. Like, I mean, these guys in the romances, they're good guys. Like, you want to root for these guys. You want these women to find happiness. You want them to overcome their issues, and and everybody get their little happily ever after. So can you talk a little bit about how you go about structuring the romances?
Yeah, we had so much fun writing the romantic subplots. It was really just a joy to write these. And it's interesting. Sometimes you do things unconsciously as a writer, and you sort of figure it out later on that, the romances really help each woman in her individual character growth, as well as she starts to learn some lessons about herself, and the men sort of ground them and help them sort of realize that they're worthy, and that they, are worthy of having, love and affection and all of that. But yeah, we wanted it to feel really like big-hearted and very, healthy and safe, and just a good romance for each of them to help them just feel empowered and loved and wanted. We wanted it to be healthy and happy.
And it still has that sizzle. Like, I mean, like, I want to say, like the nice thing is that when you get into like the more physical sexual scenes, like there's very clear consent, like there's very clear, like all these things that like, are in our consciousness that maybe weren't in our consciousness 5 or 10 years ago are now really like, I'm like, I really appreciate seeing like, yes, like, are you cool with this? Yes, let's go. Like, and it's very sex positive and very like, like love positive, and in a way that feels really satisfying without feeling like, like overly like Pollyanna about it. Like, we're not like, it still feels real. It still feels sexy and fun and spontaneous, but it's just like, oh, good. We're really like, everybody's on the same page. Can you talk about what it's like what in your mind makes a good sex scene? Like, what in your mind makes a good, like, good steamy scene, even if it's not overt sex? Like, what amps up the steam factor for you guys in your writing?
We talk a lot about that because, so we've written, I think, 3 books now together. And so there's each character in each book, there is that romantic moment, and it's different for every character because every character, every person, every relationship is different. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about is that what makes those scenes so satisfying is the emotional connection, and like they're just having it mean something. And we talked a lot about like, how steamy do we go? And when you're invested in these characters, like you don't want to skip that part. Like, it's an important part of romantic relationships. And Brady's really good at adding in the steam. So it's funny. Our the last chance, our copy edits, like the last chance we have to look at the book, Bradeigh took her character's chapter and upped the steam. And I was like, whoa, not fair. You got to do it to my character too.
Nice. Oh, I love it. I love that. That's awesome. Bradeigh, I love that you got to have seamless sexual. Yes. You gotta like pop in there and add a little like, see, but sometimes it like, when people do it, I think you're right that the emotional connection, like when you don't have that emotional connection, it feels like weird. Like sometimes I'm like, now I feel like you're just writing this just for the sake of like writing it. And like, as opposed to like, this really makes sense from a character perspective that this character would make this choice in that moment, in this intimate moment. And it shows you a different side of the characters, and it's not just there to be steamy. It's there to move the plot along. It's there to develop the relationship. It's there to make us all fall in love with this situation, right? Because it's like, yeah, that's a good guy. Like, there we go. I love it. Now, did you find at any point, like, was there a moment where either of the characters presented like a problem, or the plot presented a problem? Like, was there ever a moment where you guys hit a hiccup in the writing process? And if so, how did you work together to kind of overcome that and move forward?
I'm trying to think, Alison, can you think of anything?
You're like, nope, it all flowed out. We were perfect.
Writing this book was very smooth. And I would say writing our next book, we have hit some hiccups. And I think it's just the difference, every book's going to be a little bit different.
Yep.
But what do you think, Alison? Do you have an example of something in the Beach Trap?
I don't think so. But one of the things that we talk about, because a lot of people are curious about the dynamics of, of partnership and writing together, and if you have creative differences. And I think that what helps us out, again, is that we plot and we have a lot of those hard conversations in the beginning. And so we're very much aligned. And if we do have if we have a point where we disagree on something, we talk about it. And that, like Bradeigh has a good point when we've talked about this before, is that, sometimes that means that maybe what's on the page isn't as clear as it was in the writer's mind, or there's a reason for it. And so we talk through it. And I think that like, it's just part of our process and friendship. But with this book, I think it was as far as writing a book goes, it was a pretty easy process. I think our second one had a few more challenges, but this one, it came together really. I don't know if there were big changes from our outline to the final book.
That's really cool to hear. I mean, it's that magic. Like sometimes you get the big magic, and like it sounds like you guys had that on this book, where it was just like, yeah, we're on the same page of this. We got to make this happen and do it. How do you keep each other motivated? Is it just that like, you were both in the same motivational space and you were like, yeah, like you were just on the same pace, like, or did one of you ever go, oh, like I'm feeling frustrated, like, it sounds like no, like it sounds like the answer to that question is no, but I'm eager to know like how you keep each other, like motivated. It sounds like positive, like, like I love you, you got this. Like,
so, yeah, Alison is like a wonderful hype woman. So I love sending my chapters to her because she always is like, oh, I love this. Amazing. So cute. Like she's wonderful at doing that. And so I try to reciprocate, but she's just like naturally such a good hype woman that makes it really helpful as a writer. But I think like every writer goes through times when they're like, this isn't working. I can't figure it out with this character. This doesn't feel right to me. And it can be super frustrating. And so then we have the other one to just, to say, can you help me with this paragraph? Can you give me some ideas with this? Yeah. And luckily, we have sort of traded off in terms of if one of us is having like a mental breakdown. We have a rule, we're not allowed to have a mental breakdown at the same time, just one at a time.
I like that. I actually saw, what did I see online the other day that somebody was saying their kids are only, somehow she told her toddler when her newborn was born that like only one kid is allowed to have a tantrum at a time. And she's like, somehow this has lasted like throughout their young childhood. She's like, I don't know how I managed to do this. And they're like, I love that. Like only one of us is allowed to have a freak out at any time. And the other rule. Which is like normal, right? Like I feel like when everyone else is freaking out around you, you're like, we got this. We're calm. Like, and then when you're having your moment of crisis, your partner is like, okay, I got you. We're gonna do this. I love it. It sounds like you guys have such a strong, like solid friendship and partnership, and you can tell that comes out in your book and in your portrayal of these women, and the idea of women being there for each other in a real way, not that superficial way, but like, these two women, they go through a lot, but they're ultimately like, we're rooting for them to be able to sustain their relationship, because we see these glimmers of that throughout the book. Florida, again, let's talk. So Alison, it sounds like Destin came from your life, from your background and your history of going there, with your family. Bradeigh, had you ever been to Destin before that? And if so, where did Florida come in your personal experience? And do you guys think you'll stay there, or are you moving to a different locale for your next book? Because you're already,
when we were writing the kind of the first draft, and I had never been to Destin yet. And so I would just ask Alison, where should I set this? Please add in any setting details. Where should this scene be? And she was really helpful with that. But then we knew that I needed to be there to experience it. And there is something different when you're used to a place. Like Alison knew Destin really well. You see it through different eyes than someone who hadn't been there before. And so that was helpful for me to go there so I could really think like, this is, the sand there is unreal. It's so soft and white. There's no sand like that. Just there's such good food there. There's just sort of a different vibe there. And so trying to capture that. But every single place in the book is real. It's a real place, including down to where the actual house is. There's not a house there, but there's a space there that we imagine the house being. But we wanted it to feel really just like the setting was part of the book. And we went to every single place. We ate all the food. So hopefully that comes through.
Yeah.
Very difficult research. Very difficult research.
Yeah. It sounds like a struggle. I don't know how you guys got through that. I feel really bad for you. And yeah, we're all just a little jealous over here. On that note, what did you learn while writing the first book? This is a question from our friend Anissa. What did you learn while writing the first book that helped you in the second book?
Hi, Anissa. That's a great question. I think that it was a very different, the second book was a different process because in this book, Kat and Blake had, there were some chapters together, but they both kind of had their own moments. And our next book, Jenna, you asked where the next book is set. It's set in Chicago, where I live and Bradeigh has lived before. So it's another city that we both are very familiar with. But in our next book, we have sisters who live together and work together. And so they're a lot more ingrained in the experience. So I think we've learned just on how to work with each other. Bradeigh, maybe a little bit. Just even thinking about the process, Bradeigh is very fast and very prolific, and I can get in my head sometimes about deadlines and being overwhelmed. So I think that we were a little bit more careful about either staying on the same schedule or more likely, I'm pretty sure Bradeigh got ahead and just didn't tell me she was ahead.
I like that. On that note, actually, because we have another question from our friend Margaret, did either of you have a writing tendency that you had to train differently from your novels, i.e. researching endless details or so how did you approach that, Alison? If when you kind of got bogged down in it, or did one of you like Bradeigh? I mean, you're used to writing thrillers. Were you like, oh yeah, we need to have a body come out here? Obviously not. But the idea of oh, we need this thing. Did you have any sort of natural inclinations that got maybe even stretched or developed differently in the writing of this book?
The thing that comes to mind for me is my other books are closed door. And I think that that's probably the biggest difference between an Alison Hammer book and an Ali Brady book is the going there with a romance. And so Bradeigh helped with that for sure. But I don't know if because we had such a good relationship as critique partners. I feel like our strengths really balance each other. And I don't know, Bradeigh, do you think of anything that you had to do differently?
I think it's just putting on sort of a different hat, getting into a different mindset when we would write this book, that, a different voice, a different sort of style of approaching it. And when I tended to kind of work on, our book in a solid chunk of weeks on end, and wasn't bouncing back and forth every day, working on two totally different style of books. So that helped me. But honestly, it felt really natural. I don't know. It felt really easy and natural to write together. And I think our voices, we were able to sort of blend them well together. And many people have said it feels really seamless. So it's sort of just taking a slightly different angle, but it was really very fun and joyful the whole time.
It's so fun. And there's a difference, when I got the cover for my solo book or Bradeigh got the cover for her solo book, we were both so excited and happy for each other. But when it's our book, it's just a different, it's you have somebody that's just as excited as you are, and for the highs and the lows and the frustrations and all the exciting things. It's just been a really awesome experience. My first two books came out during the pandemic. So we did a book tour for The Beach Trap, and getting to do that with my best friend and travel all around, it's just been amazing.
Which we have another question from Anissa. What were the highlights of your first book tour together? Tell us a little bit about it. That must have been it's always more fun to travel with friends, right?
So many. Meeting Anissa was great.
Anissa.
You met Anissa.
And she bought us cookies and muffins I mean, honestly, one of the parts that I thought would be the worst, I think ended up being the best. maybe not for Bradeigh because she was doing the driving. We had an event in that was amazing in Greenville, and then the next day had an event in Pawleys Island. And so we had to drive like 4.5 hours, like starting at 9 p.m. So we were on the road from like 9 until 2 in the morning. But we kept each other entertained. Bradeigh drove. We had a pickup truck because it was cheaper than a normal car. I was the DJ, and we played 90 songs, and we sang our hearts out. We did an AMA, which is still on our Instagram. And we did, Bradeigh, I was thinking about this the other day. We did a game about guessing Starburst flavors. Turns out I'm really good at that.
We had a whole game. It was really fun. Yeah, it was super fun. But also just being able to meet readers was amazing. As you know, Alison, like she said, she didn't get to do any actual real, live events for her books. And it's so much fun doing events together, so much fun meeting readers. And honestly, when you're just starting out as a new debut together, you kind of don't think you have any fans yet, because who would really care about us? But there were people who actually came they wanted to see us, and they didn't know us.
Our friends. Yeah.
They weren't our friends. They weren't our fan. They weren't our mom's friends. They just were people who wanted to meet us and liked our book. Like, it was amazing.
Cool.
That is like the best feeling when somebody that has no connection to you likes what you do. You're like, oh my God, wait, what, really? Like did you actually just like that? Like, you're not my mom. Or my mom.
You want to meet us? Like, it was very cool.
Yeah, like that's super cool. I love that. And yeah, please don't forget to obviously follow both women as Ali Brady and their individual handles on social media. We'll pop those in the chat, or they might already be popped in, by our fabulous producer, Julie Gerstenblatt, who's backstage. And as always, like doing all the heavy lifting backstage and facilitating the convo. We love that. We love our Julie. Thank you so much, Julie. And Julie's fabulous debut novel is going to be out next spring, and I cannot wait. It's incredible. And I can't wait for the world to see it. Oh, sorry. I took away the comment accidentally. I was thinking that was a question. Moving on, just a couple more questions, and then I'll let you go, because you are both busy, busy women. Like, you have very full professional lives, personal lives. You write your own books, and you're writing this together. Like, some might call this a little bit, I don't know, overachieving, or maybe like rubbing the rest of our noses in it. Tell me, how do you do it? How do you structure your time and energy so that you can do all of these things and actually finish? Like, I love that you are finishing things and getting them out the door. It's something that I personally struggle with, like getting it done and releasing it, as opposed to just working on it forever. Like, talk to me about how you manage your time, both of you.
I don't know how well we do it. We do it. And I think that like some days are better than others. And one thing, my debut had a lot about work-life balance and a working mother, workaholic. And one thing that through talking to women around that is that the idea of balance doesn't exist. It's a seesaw. And sometimes like the book stuff needs to be more. Sometimes work needs to be more. Sometimes family. And it's really riding the waves. But one thing that really helps, it's a pro and a con, quite honestly, is like being accountable to each other. Because when it's like, when you have a chapter due, if it's just due for yourself, it's like, I can put it aside, but we don't want to let each other down. But at the same time, we, love each other and understand that we all have different, things at different times that we might need help with. And so I think it's really communication, it's accountability, and it's, not always getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just consistency. I mean, if you set aside a consistent, even if it's just a couple hours, most days, you can write a book. It is completely possible, especially if you are really focused during that time. And so for me, it comes down to that. And also, the nice thing about writing is you can do a lot of thinking throughout the day as you do other things. You can be doing laundry. You can be thinking about your book. You can be, driving and thinking about your book, and then, take some notes in your notes app. And then when you are able to sit down, it can all come pouring out. So I think when you're consistent, you can get a lot done. But there are some sacrifices. You may not be able to, watch as much TV as you may otherwise want to watch, or may have to cut back on some things. But I do think it's possible with just consistency.
Yeah. Are you guys morning, nighttime writers? Like, what do you have a time of day that where you feel like your creativity is maximalized, or are you just able to work anywhere, anytime, and like have trained yourselves that way?
When you're on deadline, you kind of like what you want, it kind of goes out the window. But I think naturally, for me, I work in advertising during the day and sometimes at night. But so I've gotten into a place where I write for at least an hour, most days for like an hour after work in the evening.
Yep.
And then weekends are my happy places, like sitting outside or going to Starbucks and really getting like a 5 to 6 at least hour chunk in. So I'm not a morning person. I wish I could wake up early, but I just can't.
How about you, Bradeigh?
I wake up early for my job, but I cannot write creatively in the morning. It takes me a good while for that to sort of get going. So I tend to do more writing in the evening or just whenever I can, catching an hour here or there. If the kids are working on homework, then I'll just pull out my computer and also work. And so I think it's, taking the chance when you get it.
Only certain scenes, though. That was a lesson you learned, that you cannot like.
Yes, when you get to the steamy scene, which actually happened once during the pandemic when I was homeschooling kids. I was working at home and they were doing homework and we were at the dining room table and it was time to write a steamy scene. And I started writing it and I looked around at my kids and I was like, nope. And you shut the laptop.
Not happening. That's so true. Like sometimes you have to just be like, I can't be like looking at this while this is happening. Like this, you gotta have some separation emotionally and psychologically and physically too. Right. That's really cute. And how do you think the other parts of your life influence you as a creator and vice versa? Like this is something like clearly this is, it sounds like it's something you've both been doing for a long time. Obviously, Alison, this is, your third book. Bradeigh, obviously it sounds like you've written other books and now you're having like them come out at the same time. So what was the moment for both of you, when you were like, I need this other thing in my life as well? And how did you manage to make space for that in your life? And then how did that in turn affect the rest of your life? And like, and kind of, I guess what I'm saying is like, how did that influence the other areas of your life? Because it seems like this has been a very positive thing for both of you. And I think it's such an important story to tell that like, it's worth it, even if it's hard to do this thing that fills you up so you can show up in those other areas of your life.
I mean, honestly, the whole thing was impulsive. Like, it wasn't like we were planning this out. It was like a spark. Like, what if we did this? Would this be crazy? Yes, but let's do it anyway. Like, it wasn't something like that. And I'm a big believer in, like the pandemic. I had some challenges with really being a debut in the pandemic, and had some challenges with my third book. But quite honestly, like Bradeigh and I were talking about this, I don't know if I could have handled my very busy full-time job, a solo book launch, and this. And so it's been nice being able to focus on this. Like, I hope that I'll be able to have my third solo book out at some point, but it's nice to focus on this. And as far as the aspects of other life, I feel like we both inherently bring parts of ourselves into the stories. And, a quote that I love is that everything is material. Like, everything that we have in our personal lives and our writing lives, like, might end up in a book, but this wasn't something that we planned. It just happened, and we're really riding the wave.
Yeah. And I think I have done a lot of thinking, and Alison has been there as I have processed a lot of this idea as when you are raising kids, it can be really hard to carve out time for yourself because it does feel really selfish, because you sort of have this idea from maybe the media or society that when you have children, that needs to be like 100% of your focus.
100%.
And I honestly struggled a lot with this. Alison was there as I kind of worked through this.
I'm struggling with it, like, full disclosure. Like, I'm in the thick of it right now. I'm like, and I've never been that. I've always been like, I'm gonna be fine and I'm always gonna write for my, and I'm like, oh, this is really hard. this pressure.
Yes.
Like, sorry, continue.
It is. There can be a lot of sort of guilty feelings, like I should be spending every minute with my kid, like enriching their life. And there are absolutely times when you're raising kids that you do need to do that. I mean, of course. But there's a lot of times when like kids need to have some independence and they need to learn how to take, play on their own. And I think I've been amazed at my kids watching me do something that was really hard and they know that it's taken a lot of work. And like, it's amazing to see their faces kind of light up when they're like, oh, this is your book. Oh, Mom, your box of books came in the mail. Your book was at the bookstore. It's just this idea of you don't have to give up the things that fill your soul with joy and sacrifice all of that for someone else. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for you. It's not good for your kids. It's not good for the world. So
I agree. I think it can't be stated enough. And we have a wonderful, another one of our fabulous lit chick authors, Brookly Foster, who just put out her second book on Jin Lane this summer. She just wrote a great article about this. I encourage everyone to read it. And there's the crux of her article was a way of thinking about it that I had never thought of before, which is that my kids are seeing the real me when I do this. I'm actually showing them who I am. It's actually creating a deeper and more intimate relationship with my children because I'm letting them see who I really am besides the person who gets their apple slices and their milk. Like, they're seeing that I am also this person that does this thing. And that has made, she's like, now I talk, about plot points with my kids and I'll talk about it and they feel involved and they feel like, and I think it's just like, if you love baseball, teaching your kid how to play baseball or like doing, throwing the ball around with them, like you can share your loves with your kids as well. And
Brady's kids have helped us in the book. We've got a bookmark here with all of the names of our dog. And Brady, you want to tell how we got all those names?
Yeah, I sat down with my daughter and the notes app on my phone, and we just started brainstorming nicknames for the dog. Just started at the top and just went all the way down. And it was so fun. They actually helped quite a bit. I mean, I'll ask them, what's a good name for such and such? What should we do? Or sometimes, they know the things that like the youths are into. So.
And it also helps for believable like portrayals of children in books. It's like, you don't get the like too precocious, but like just precocious enough. And cause like
there's a little shout out to Brady's youngest daughter in the book with the character Henry's daughter Sunny has a stuffed animal that was named after Nora's, and then Kat's stuffed animal Barry is a stuffed animal. So there's lots of little Easter eggs with people in our lives, especially Brady's kids.
Oh, I love that so much. Guys, this is such a fun book. I loved it so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. We had a great discussion here. I'm going to ask you just like one more question and then I'm going to let you go back to your busy lives and to writing more fabulous books. Can you just tell us what you're both working on now together and individually, and give us what's coming next for each of you?
Want to go first, Brady?
Sure. So we're almost ready to turn in the draft of our next book to our editor. The first chapter of it is in the back of the Beach Trap, so you can read it and get a little sneak peek, although it has been edited quite a bit since then.
A lot.
But it's another story about two sisters. This time they're trying to save their PR agency that they inherited from their grandmother. So they are really enmeshed in each other's lives. They live together and they work together, and they have to do these crazy challenges to try to save their PR agency. And old flames come back into their life, and somebody falls for somebody they're not supposed to, and complications ensue. And they try to figure out some of their own, character growth as well as their relationship with sisters. So it's a fun, summery story set in Chicago. So we're really excited about it.
Love it. And tell us about your book, Bradeigh, that's coming out. Tell us about Imposter.
Thank you. So Imposter is a psychological thriller, and it's interestingly also about two sisters, but a much darker tone.
Yes.
They're not like happy vacationing in Florida, sister.
Sisters have a lot of secrets from each other, and somebody is stalking them, and there's a lot more twists and turns. But yes, also, but sisterhood is actually a really fun relationship to explore in fiction. So I'm excited about that too.
And it comes out on September 13th, and it is excellent. So highly recommend pre-ordering it today.
Alison Hammer, hype woman. Love it.
Hype woman, yes.
It's really
Alison, what's hype yourself now? What's your next book? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Like right now, the Ali Brady thing is my focus, which is really fun. I've got another project with another co-author friend, more of like a one-off thing with Stephen Kellogg, who is a amazing singer-songwriter. And we wrote this book together over NaNoWriMo in 2020, and we're working on like our third draft of it. It's been a little bit with him touring and my work life, and then this stuff. It's been a little slower, I think, than we want, but we're really excited about it. It's about it's called The Set List. And it's about a musician in his 50s who hasn't played in a long time, needs to make some money, and calls his old manager, who sends him out on the road with a 25-year-old TikTok star. So it's pretty exciting. It hasn't gone on submission or anything yet, but that's my other project, but mostly focusing on Ali Brady.
Nice. I love it. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everyone out there who's joining us on Lit Chick today. Thank you to our producer, Julie Gerstenblatt. Thank you, as always, to the Mighty Blaze family for having us all the time. Congratulations on the Beach Trap. Ali Brady is the pen name. Alison Hammer, Bradeigh Godfrey. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations again. And happy reading, everyone. We'll see you next time on Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.